Bhattacharya joins us
Hi,
in
Jay.
the studio. Hi. Your main story is one that we've been hearing a lot about lately, and that's the alt-right, as it's known in the US, the far-right movement in the US, and who they are exactly. Tell us more.
That's right. Alt-right is a term that we only started hearing about a year ago, and it was coined to lump together all kinds of far-right militants. This Thursday, France's Le Monde newspaper wrote an article about who they are and where they meet on the internet and in real life, and what their influences are, how they identify. Now, the article is based on the work of a scholar at Edinburgh named Tim Squirrel, who first published his findings in Quartz a few days ago. He breaks down the so-called alt-right into 5 subgroups that are porous and uniting in their hatred for different parts of U.S. society. He studied the linguistics in this Reddit discussion called The Donald. And those 5 subgroups are that he was referring to. 1, white supremacists, who the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines as people who believe that the white race is inherently superior to other races and that whites should control other races. 2, anti-globalists, so conspiracy theorists who have a deep hatred for what they call the establishment, as well as Jews. 3, men's rights activists who explicitly campaign for men's rights and that they also include anti-feminists and misogynists. 4, anti-progressive gamers, so video game players who hate so-called social justice warriors, gay people and feminists. And 5, 4chan trolls, people who belong and contribute to the 4chan website. A version of that group also exists on Reddit. Now, here is the 4chan website and the board, and if you look closely and you read the discussions and you look at the pictures, it's true that it's very offensive.
Okay, so it's quite a broad grouping of people, but all of them somewhat extreme in their views. Now, how many of these people are there? Have they been totted up, quantified?
Well, Tim Squirrel, who wrote who did the linguistic study, he recruited almost 450 of them for just $3 each. So he found it quite easy to find them. It is impossible, though, to know exactly how many of them there are. But we do know that many start off in one subgroup and end up espousing the ideas of what we call the alt-right as a whole. So another study on this topic was published earlier this month by 2 U.S. scholars. The Atlantic wrote an in-depth article on this study. The article came out last week.
The dark minds of the alt-right.
That's right, exactly. So according to this study, that's right here, and that was also published earlier this month, people who identify as alt-right have 3 core beliefs as follows. 1, that white people are at a disadvantage. We can see that in this tweet right here, which is, oh no, it's not there. But Patriot saying that white people also need to be defended, and I'm sorry, I can't, it disappeared.
It was in that Twitter feed.
It was in this
somewhere.
Twitter feed somewhere, and it used the hashtag MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, of course.
So Donald Trump's campaign slogan being tied with these ideas, basically.
Exactly.
So even if he's saying, I'm not that, well, his slogans are being connected.
They're being used by people who believe these things. So the second core belief that these people have is that they want to take action to boost white people's standing, such as staging a rally in Charlottesville, for example. And then 3, the belief that other religious and ethnic groups are subhuman. Now, the authors of this study said that there are 2 subgroups within people who call themselves the alt-right. First are the populists, who are mainly concerned with government corruption and are less extremist, and supremacists, who are often more extreme and racist. And the authors say that often people who start off as populists slowly become more supremacist over time as they are exposed to more extremist views. Well, they change, they evolve. Right.
for want of another word.
For worse.
How can they disappear or at least be put perhaps in their place? Shona, I presume there's been some
a lot of
ideas
discussion
on
about
that,
psychologists and policymakers. Well, one way is to give them less importance is to talk about them less, or at least to change the term that has really become a lightning rod for many. So shortly after the events in Charlottesville, where, as a reminder, a young woman was killed and 19 others were injured when a far-right activist rammed his car into a crowd of liberal supporters, The Associated Press, so one of the biggest press agencies in the world, wrote that the term alt-right... Oh my goodness.
And alt, we can presume, comes from alternative rights, or probably originally, or alt...
Yes,
in any case,
maybe it did, but it doesn't even mean that
right.
anymore.
And it doesn't
it's
have
a kind of term that has become a thing in and of itself. And so the Associated Press says that basically using the term alt-right should be avoided, that it should be defined when it is used, it should be put in quotation marks, or it should only be used when describing what the movement says about itself. Now, of course, with the internet, there is space for everyone, and everyone can have a voice, and that's one of the wonderful democratic things about the internet. But at the same time, that space makes it so that they will never disappear, right? Even from kind of the public eye. So.
It reminds me a little bit of the debate on the Islamic State group, the self-proclaimed Islamic State, which isn't a state. So should we use their terminology or should we adapt it? It's kind of a similar type discussion, I guess.
It is. And it also makes you wonder about, who's on which side and who has power and who is trying to counter that power. It's a lot about power in there as well.
The power of naming, I guess. Thanks for that, Shona.
Thank you, James.
And that